Rome didn't always fall to barbarians. Sometimes, its greatest threat came from within. At the height of its power, one rebellion pushed the empire closer to collapse than any foreign army ever could, and most people have never heard of it. Rome did not fall in a single moment. It did not collapse beneath one barbarian invasion or one catastrophic defeat. Long before the sack of Rome, long before the empire fractured permanently, there was a period when the Roman world almost ceased to exist entirely, not centuries later, but at the height of its power. A time when Rome was still vast, still feared, still dominant, and yet closer to annihilation than it had ever been before. This was not a war Rome expected, and it was not a threat. It understood, because the danger did not come from outside its borders, it came from within. In the early 3rd century, the Roman Empire stretched from the misty highlands of Britain to the deserts of Syria, from the Rhine frontier to the sands of North Africa. Its roads connected continents, its laws governed tens of millions. Its legions were the most disciplined military force the ancient world had ever known. To most Romans, the empire felt eternal. It had survived civil wars before. It had endured bad emperors, rebellions, and invasions. Rome always recovered. That belief, quiet, unshakable confidence in Roman permanence, was perhaps the most dangerous illusion of all. Because beneath the surface of this immense empire, foundations were already cracking. The Roman army, once loyal to the state, had become loyal to its generals. Emperors rise not by law or tradition, but by the favor of soldiers who expected rewards, land, and gold in return. The economy strained under the weight of constant warfare and debased currency. The frontiers grew longer and harder to defend, and Rome's political system, designed for a smaller empire, creaked under the pressure of ruling the known world. In the year 235 AD, the illusion shattered. The emperor Alexander Severus was campaigning along the Rhine, attempting to manage growing threats from Germanic tribes. He was young, cautious, and deeply unpopular with his own soldiers. When discipline collapsed, the legions did not mutiny quietly. They murdered him, not in secret, not in fear, but openly, violently, and without consequence. In his place, they elevated one of their own commanders, Maximinus Thrax, a man of enormous size, brutal reputation, and no connection to Rome's political elite. This was not just a change of leadership, it was a precedent. For the first time, an emperor had been made solely by the army, without approval from the Senate or the old aristocracy. Power now belonged to whoever controlled the legions, and once that door was opened, it could never be closed again. What followed was not a single rebellion, but a chain reaction. Generals across the empire watched carefully. If one man could seize power with soldiers alone, why not another? Loyalty dissolved. Suspicion spread. Every successful commander became a potential emperor. Every army became a threat not only to Rome's enemies, but to Rome itself. Within a few years, the empire descended into chaos. Emperors rise and fell with terrifying speed. Some ruled for years, others for months, some for days. Many never even reached Rome. They were proclaimed emperor by their troops, marched toward power, and died before they arrived, assassinated by rivals, betrayed by soldiers, or cut down by former allies. Rome was no longer governed. It was contested. At the same time, the outside world sensed weakness. Along the northern frontiers, Germanic tribes tested Rome's defenses, pushing deeper into imperial territory than they had in generations. In the east, a new and aggressive Persian empire replaced the old Parthian state, launching devastating campaigns against Roman provinces. Cities fell. Entire legions were wiped out. For the first time in centuries, Rome began losing ground, and it could not respond effectively because Rome was fighting itself. Resources meant for defense were diverted to civil war. Armies that should have guarded the borders were marching against other Romans. Provinces were stripped bare to fund rival emperors. Trust evaporated. The empire that had once thrived on order now fed on paranoia. Then came the fracture. As Rome weakened, entire regions stopped pretending that the central government could protect them. In the West, Roman generals in Gaul and Britain broke away, forming their own empire, complete with emperors, armies, and administration. In the East, the wealthy city of Palmyra rose under a powerful local dynasty, effectively governing itself while Rome struggled to survive. For a brief, terrifying moment, the Roman Empire did not exist as a single state at all. It was split into three. Rome still stood, but it was no longer the center of the world. It was just another contender in a collapsing system, surrounded by enemies, betrayed by its own soldiers, and bleeding from wounds it could not heal. This was the moment Rome came closest to death. Not because it was defeated, because it was unraveling. And yet, against all odds, it survived. Not intact, not unchanged, but alive. What saved Rome was not a return to the old system, but its destruction. The crisis forced transformation. Power was centralized. The army was reorganized. The idea of Rome itself was reshaped. When stability finally returned, the empire that emerged was not the Rome of Augustus or Trajan, but something harder, more authoritarian, and far more fragile. The rebellion that nearly killed Rome did not end the empire. It ended the illusion that Rome could never fall. Rome's enemies did not need to invent new ways to destroy the empire. Rome was already doing the work for them. As the years passed after Alexander Severus' murder, the rhythm of Roman life began to break down. The steady certainty of imperial rule was replaced by anxiety and improvisation. Coins lost value so quickly that soldiers demanded payment in goods instead of money. Farmers abandoned fields that could no longer be protected. Cities reinforced walls not against foreign invaders but against Roman armies that might arrive tomorrow claiming loyalty to a new emperor. The empire still looked vast on a map, but in practice it was splintering into isolated regions, each trying to survive on its own. The heart of this chaos was a terrifying truth. The Roman army no longer served Rome, it served itself. Legions had learned that emperors were temporary, but soldiers endured. If an emperor failed to deliver victory, pay, or security, he could be replaced. If a general promised more, the army would follow him instead. Murder became policy, loyalty became currency, and every time an emperor was killed by his own troops, the cycle accelerated. Maximinus Thrax, the soldier emperor who followed Alexander Severus, ruled through fear and brutality. He never even visited Rome. He taxed the provinces mercilessly to fund his armies, draining the empire to maintain control. Eventually, the Senate declared him a public enemy. Other emperors were proclaimed in opposition. Civil war erupted once again. By the year 238, later remembered as the Year of the Six Emperors, Rome had lost all sense of stability. In a matter of months, emperors were declared, overthrown, and executed with astonishing speed. Authority no longer flowed from law or tradition. It flowed from violence. Every decision was provisional, every alliance temporary. The empire lived from day to day, unsure who would rule next week, or whether there would be a ruler at all. While Rome tore itself apart, the world beyond its borders moved swiftly. In the east, a new Persian dynasty, the Sassanids, had replaced the older Parthian rulers. Unlike their predecessors, they were centralized, aggressive, and ideologically driven. They did not raid Roman territory for plunder. They invaded to conquer. Roman fortresses fell. Cities that had been Roman for centuries were lost. Entire provinces slipped from imperial control. Then came a humiliation Rome could barely comprehend. In 260 AD, Emperor Valerian marched east to confront the Persians. He was an experienced ruler, a veteran of decades of chaos, determined to restore Rome's authority. Instead, he was defeated, captured, taken, alive by the Persian king Shapur I, a Roman emperor chained and paraded before foreign crowds, reduced to a living symbol of Roman weakness. It was unprecedented. No Roman emperor had ever been captured by an enemy. To many across the empire, this was not just a military defeat. It was a cosmic shock. Rome's aura of invincibility was gone. If an emperor could be captured, then Rome itself could fall. And with Valerian gone, the empire fractured even further. In the west, provinces that had once depended on Roman protection made a desperate calculation. If Rome could no longer defend them, they would defend themselves. Generals in Gaul, Britain, and parts of Hispania declared independence, forming what modern historians call the Gallic Empire. It had its own emperors, its own army, its own administration. It did not claim to destroy Rome, claimed to preserve Roman order where Rome could not. In the east, the wealthy trading city of Palmyra rose under the leadership of Queen Zenobia. Officially loyal to Rome, Palmyra in practice became a rival power, controlling vast territories and commanding its own armies. Zenobia ruled efficiently, decisively, and with ambition. To her subjects, she was stability in a collapsing world. To Rome, she was a warning sign of how far authority had slipped. For the first time, the Roman Empire existed in pieces. There was Rome, struggling to assert control. There was the Gallic Empire, defending the west. And there was Palmyra, dominating the east. Each claimed legitimacy. Each governed Roman citizens. Each believed it was acting out of necessity. But the result was catastrophic. Trade routes collapsed. Communication slowed. Shared identity eroded. The idea of a single Roman world, one law, one emperor, one destiny, was fading. This was the true rebellion that nearly killed Rome. Not one army, not one uprising, but the slow realization across the empire that Rome could no longer be trusted to survive. Plagues swept through cities already weakened by war and famine. Entire regions were depopulated. The countryside emptied as people fled through fortified towns or disappeared altogether. Coinage was debased so severely that prices became meaningless. Barter replaced money. Confidence vanished. And yet, even in this darkness, Rome did not collapse. Because crisis created opportunity. Out of the chaos emerged a new type of emperor. Men forged not in the Senate, but on the battlefield. Hard, pragmatic, relentless leaders who understood that the old Roman system was broken beyond repair. They did not attempt to restore the past. They aimed to survive the present. One by one, these emperors clawed territory back. They crushed breakaway states, not through persuasion, but force. They reasserted control over the army by tying loyalty directly to the emperor himself. They accepted that Rome could no longer be governed as it once had been. The most important of these figures would not come from Rome's old aristocracy, but from its frontiers. Men shaped by instability, accustomed to constant war, willing to rule with iron discipline because nothing else worked anymore. The empire did not heal. It hardened. Rome survived the rebellion by becoming something new, more centralized, more militarized, and far less forgiving. The freedoms of earlier centuries were quietly abandoned in exchange for security. Power was concentrated. Dissent crushed quickly. The emperor was no longer first among equals. He was a ruler by necessity. The rebellion that nearly killed Rome was not defeated in a single battle. It was endured, absorbed, transformed into a lesson written in blood. And as the dust settled, the empire stood again, smaller, poorer, and deeply scarred, but alive. What remained was a Roman world that no longer believed in its own eternity. And that belief, once lost, could never truly be restored. By the late 3rd century, Rome was no longer collapsing in slow motion. It was either going to recover or finally come apart. The chaos of endless claimants and fractured authority had burned through nearly an entire generation. Emperors still rose by the sword, but now those who survived understood something their predecessors had not. Rome could not be saved by pretending the old world still existed. The Senate was irrelevant. Tradition was ornamental. Survival demanded control, speed, and force. The turning point came not from a philosopher or reformer, but from a soldier. Aurelian rose to power in 270 AD, during the darkest phase of the crisis. He inherited an empire reduced to fragments, humiliated abroad, and exhausted at home. He did not attempt to negotiate unity. He imposed it. To Aurelian, hesitation was weakness, and mercy was a luxury Rome could no longer afford. His first task was the East. Palmyra, under Queen Zenobia, had become the richest and most stable power in the Roman world. Its armies protected trade routes. Its administration functioned efficiently. Its people prospered while Rome suffered. Zenobia ruled not as a rebel in her own mind, but as a guardian of Roman civilization abandoned by its own center. Aurelian saw only one truth: an empire divided would die. He marched east with an army hardened by years of civil war. The campaigns were swift and brutal. Palmyrene forces were defeated in open battle. Zenobia attempted to flee, but she was captured. Palmyra surrendered and then rebelled again. This time, Aurelian showed no restraint. The city was sacked, its wealth stripped, its power broken forever. The message was clear: Rome would be whole, but it would be nothing. Aurelian turned west next, toward the Gallic Empire. There was no grand ideological conflict here, only exhaustion. The breakaway state had kept order, but it could not stand alone forever. When Roman armies advanced, resistance collapsed. The western provinces were reintegrated not through conquest alone, but relief. Unity, even harsh unity, was preferable to endless uncertainty. In just 5 years, Aurelian reunited the empire. It was an extraordinary achievement. Rome, which had seemed beyond saving, was once again whole. Borders were restored. Authority reasserted. The rebellion that nearly killed Rome had been beaten back. Not by restoring the past, but by enforcing a new reality. But victory came at a cost. Aurelian ruled through fear. He executed officials without trial. He crushed dissent immediately. And in 275 AD, on the eve of yet another campaign, his own officers murdered him. Victim of the same system he had mastered. Even Rome's savior could not escape the cycle of violence. Yet something fundamental had changed. After Aurelian, no one believed the empire could function as it once had. The crisis had revealed too much. Weakness could not be hidden again. The solution, when it came, would reshape Rome forever. That solution arrived with Diocletian. When Diocletian took power in 284 AD, he did not claim to be restoring the old Roman Republic or even the early empire. He declared something entirely new. Power would no longer pretend to be shared. The emperor would no longer be a citizen elevated above others. He would be distant, absolute, and untouchable. Diocletian reorganized the empire into manageable regions, each governed by emperors and co-emperors loyal to a central authority. The army was restructured. The economy was tightly controlled. Society itself was reordered to ensure stability. Above all else, professions became hereditary. Taxes were fixed. Freedom was sacrificed, deliberately, openly, in exchange for survival. This was not the Rome people remembered, but it was a Rome that could endure. The rebellion that nearly killed the empire forced it to abandon illusion. It could no longer rely on tradition or prestige. Only structure and control remained. The empire survived not because it healed, but because it adapted to permanent crisis. By the end of the 3rd century, Rome stood once more as a superpower, but it was colder, harsher, and fundamentally altered. The citizen emperors of the past were gone. In their place stood rulers who governed like kings, defended by ceremony, distance, and fear. The Roman world had been saved, and in being saved, it had been transformed beyond recognition. The rebellion did not end Rome's story. It rewrote it. Rome emerged from the 3rd century alive, but it was no longer innocent. The empire that stood after the crisis was not the Rome that had once believed itself eternal. It had learned, painfully, that survival required sacrifice, and that lesson would shape every century that followed. The rebellion that nearly killed Rome left scars deeper than ruined cities or lost provinces. It altered how power worked, how people lived, and how the empire understood itself. The reforms that saved Rome also locked it into rigidity. Diocletian's system brought order, but it did so by freezing society in place. Farmers were bound to their land. Craftsmen were bound to their trades. Taxes were enforced with relentless precision to keep the army paid and loyal. The state became omnipresent, watching, regulating, and demanding. Stability returned, but it came with a constant pressure that weighed on every citizen. For the army, the transformation was even more profound. The legions that once marched outward in conquest now existed primarily to maintain internal control and defend borders stretched thin. Soldiers were no longer symbols of Roman expansion, but guardians against collapse. Loyalty was enforced not by honor alone, but by fear of punishment and promise of survival. And the emperor, once a visible ruler walking among citizens, became something distant and almost divine. Rituals multiplied. Access was restricted. Power was no longer personal. It was institutional. The emperor ruled from behind layers of ceremony, because proximity had proven fatal. This new Rome worked for a time. The crisis of the 3rd century taught the empire how to survive chaos, but it also ensured that Rome would never fully recover its flexibility. Every future challenge, barbarian migrations, religious upheaval, economic strain, would be met with systems designed for control, not creativity. The empire could resist shocks, but it struggled to adapt beyond them. In the West, the damage lingered longest. The Gallic provinces never fully regained their former strength. Urban life declined. Trade networks shrank. Local elites increasingly relied on private protection rather than imperial authority. The memory of Rome's near death never faded there. It became expectation. In the East, where wealth and administration remained stronger, Rome flourished longer. Constantinople would rise as a new center of power, shaped by the lessons of the crisis. Strong walls, strong bureaucracy, strong emperors. The Eastern Empire was Rome refined by trauma, and it would endure for 1,000 years, more. But the West had changed forever. When later generations spoke of Rome's fall, they would focus on dramatic invasions, sackings, and final emperors. What they would miss was this earlier moment, the point where Rome learned that it could bleed, fracture, and almost vanish. The rebellion that nearly killed the Roman Empire did not end its story. It ensured that Rome would never again be what it once was. From this point on, Roman history was no longer a tale of inevitable dominance, but of survival against decline. The empire lived on not because it was invincible, but because it was willing to become something harsher, more controlled, and less free. And that choice, made in desperation, echoed across centuries. Rome survived its greatest internal rebellion. But in doing so, it quietly accepted a truth that would define its future. Nothing lasts forever. Rome did not collapse when it nearly died. That may be the most unsettling truth of all. The rebellion that pushed the empire to the brink did not end with fire and silence. It ended with administration, reform, and exhaustion. Rome survived not through triumph, but through an adaptation so extreme that the empire which emerged was barely recognizable to those who had lived before the crisis. And yet, to later generations, this survival would create an illusion that Rome had always been stable, always in control, always destined to endure. History remembers the fall of Rome as a dramatic ending. But Rome's real ending was much quieter. The crisis of the 3rd century taught the empire how to endure constant instability. It created mechanisms to absorb disaster without immediate collapse. It built a state that could survive bad emperors, economic shocks, and endless war. But those same mechanisms also drained the empire of the vitality that had once made it resilient in a different way. The Rome that survived could resist pressure, but it could no longer recover quickly from it. Every later challenge was met with heavier taxation, stricter laws, and more rigid hierarchy. Short-term survival became the goal, not long-term renewal. The empire learned how to hold itself together, but forgot how to grow. When barbarian migrations intensified centuries later, Rome responded as it had learned to, by fortifying borders, mobilizing armies, and tightening control. But these responses treated symptoms, not causes. The Western Empire, already weakened by demographic decline and economic contraction that began during crisis, lacked the resources to sustain endless defense. What had once been a temporary emergency had become permanent reality. In the East, Rome, now centered on Constantinople, used the same lessons to flourish. The structures forged in the crisis became strengths. Strong bureaucracy, centralized authority, and strategic defense allowed the Eastern Empire to survive wave after wave of threats. The rebellion that nearly killed Rome became paradoxically the foundation of Byzantine longevity. Two Roman worlds emerged from the same trauma. One endured. One slowly faded. And both were shaped by that moment when Rome nearly failed to exist at all. The crisis is often overlooked because it lacks a single villain, a single battle, or a single dramatic end. It is messier than history prefers. But it is precisely that messiness that makes it so important. It reveals how civilizations truly die. Not in one blow, but through accumulated strain, internal conflict, and the slow erosion of trust in shared institutions. Rome survived because it was willing to change. But it fell centuries later because it could no longer change enough. The rebellion that nearly killed the Roman Empire was not a warning ignored. It was a warning answered too well. The solutions that saved Rome in the short term locked it into patterns that eventually limited its future. Survival came at the cost of flexibility, freedom, and renewal. That is the quiet tragedy at the heart of Rome's story, and it is why this moment matters far beyond ancient history. Because every powerful system believes it will endure forever until it is forced to choose between survival and transformation. Rome chose survival. The consequences of that choice shaped 1,000 years of history. If this story changed how you see Rome and how civilizations rise, fracture, and endure, then you're already thinking like a historian. If you want more cinematic deep dives into the moments that almost erased the world we know, make sure to subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments, if Rome had failed during this crisis, what kind of world do you think would have taken its place? History doesn't just belong to the past. It belongs to those who understand how close it came to disappearing.